headquarters, headquarters of the task force in Vietnam.
Well, the veterans allowed one carer, Bob. Maybe the dog was that chap's carer.
Yes.
Here we have the green and gold, the Epping Golden Kangaroos, Epping RSL Golden Kangaroos. Again, one of the modern style marching bands, both in the style of marching, the instrumentation, and indeed the presentation of their music. Epping RSL Golden Kangaroos.
I'd really admire those young lasses carrying that banner. That would be so uncomfortable to carry that a long distance. They're doing a great job.
Yes, because they're not very big, are they?
Golden kangaroo, marching koalas, these are quintessentially Australian towns.
Yes.
Very much so. Very much so.
All we need is some performing platypuses.
Don't worry, Tony, it may happen.
Right, now we have the SAS, the Special Air Service Regiment. Was first formed in Western Australia in 1957 and was first deployed during the confrontation with Indonesia. During the Vietnam War, it conducted reconnaissance patrol throughout the Australian area of responsibility. More recently, it has been deployed to peacekeeping duties in Somalia, Cambodia, Rwanda. And following them, of course, we have the Commandos, the Green Berets of the Commandos, led today by Mr. Barry Grant. One Commando regiment was first formed in Sydney in 1955 and was the first Australian Special Forces unit raised after the Second World War. It is now part of one Commando regiment. And you have the Commando squadrons coming behind it.
And a number of modern-day commandos marching with them, all wearing dark sunglasses.
Is this to disguise their who they are? They want to be alone.
This is a very famous patch, yes. Of course, the
Coming
Double
up.
Diamond,
Yes,
and the Z-Force. Great history, Bob.
Really has, and the Crate, which was one of the ships they used to go and blow up ships in Singapore Harbour, the Japanese ships in Singapore Harbour. It was again, they suffered terrible casualties on the second and third attacks on the Japanese forces there, but they're very famous.
You remember one of our former commanding officers, Brigadier Keith Stringfellow. He was a Z-Force commando in World War II.
The gentlemen of the Australian Aviation, the powder blue berets, were flying mainly in Vietnam, the helicopters and the light plane, the Polaris Porters, and used for spotters for artillery. One of my friends I worked with, Henry Stowski, was a member of the powder blue boys there.
Well, it's not really powder blue, Bob, it's sky blue.
Oh, is that what it is?
Hence the aviation connection.
Yeah, they're a great unit, unit. I worked with some of those guys when we did deployments on exercise.
I was taught to fly by an Army aviator from the Aviation Corps.
Well, is that why you can't fly?
That's right.
161 Air Recce Squadrons there too.
Bob, bound to the deep south again in Sutherland, St Patrick's College Sutherland Marching Band. They've been taking part in the march, I think, for about 2 years now. I think last year might have been their first effort, and it's great to see them back. A great tune there from World War I.
And as we watch the Anzac Day parade through the centre of Sydney, thank you for your company here on ABC, and please stay tuned right here on ABC Television, because there are a number of programs scheduled that will commemorate this special day. Now, immediately following this broadcast at 12:30 p.m, we'll be crossing live to Turkey for the Gallipoli Dawn service. Now, that will be followed at 1:30 p.m. by a live telecast of the Dawn service from Villebrettner in France. And our national coverage continues right throughout the day on the ABC News channel.
Right, we now have the Australian Army Intelligence Corps Association, led today by Colonel Mike Peters and also Lieutenant Colonel Jack Spanowell. It was first established, the Corps was first established in 1907. It's been around for a long time. It had some famous names in its rank, including Major General Bridges, Sir John Monash, and other well-known. Now we have the electrical mechanical engineers, with skill and fighting as their motto. And of course, they're the ones that fix up all the mechanical things that tend to go wrong in the Australian Army. Here's some of the various units. See where they've actually served. They are the fixers of the Army, responsible for repair and maintenance of all Army electrical, mechanical equipment, be it weapons, field equipment, vehicles or helicopters, I'm sure, and computers will now be added to that list of things that they've got to do.
I can hear the Scots are coming again.
Yes, I can. Yes, I think you're fairly safe there, John.
Yeah. And number 39, which according to my list is the Castle Hill RSL Pipes and Drums. This, I think, is their second time around. They were round a little earlier.
The banner says Australian Army Service Corps and various other units. I'm just trying to pick it up at the moment.
It's hard to read, Bob, with the sun behind.
Yeah. The Australian Corps of Transport. It used to be known as the World Australian Army Services Corps, and it split to, some went to engineers and the truck stayed to the World Australian Corps of Transport, the Army's truckies.
Very ecumenical, Bob.
Very was, I think so too.
And the Corps of Transport also, John, are the members who are embedded on the ship's companies of HMAS Adelaide, Chills and Canberra. And I think we should mention the fact that Chills has just come home from the disaster relief operations up in northern New South Wales and Queensland.
And in fact, I think we should congratulate our Defence Force effort in northern New South Wales and Queensland, all three services involved, and we have to say a very big thank you for your effort, thank you for your support.
And also remembering the families who they had to leave behind over the school holidays and disappear off. So the impact was not just the people up there, it was the families of the servicemen that deployed at rapid and short notice.
We just had the Three Transport Association pass as the longest serving transport unit in the Australian Army, having first formed in 1914. He served in World War II and has been an Army Reserve and CMF unit since then. 12 Transport Company, RWSC. Another transport, well, I think it was mainly at Ashfield, wasn't it, John?
It was at Ashfield, in the grounds of what is now Ashfield Boys High School.
Yes. And the boys from their high school normally have a Anzac Day ceremony there.
Well, they used to, and I assume that that's still going.
Now we come to the Doctors and Medical Corps, led by newly elected State President Major David Zerkes. He replaces Theo de Schaffery, who led the medical units on and off since 1988. Both current and former members of the Medical Corps are marching. Our first field ambulance. Is that Ray Hislop? Just trying to.
It certainly looks like it.
And who was leading the Fifield ambulance, the patron of our association. He's also a respected gynaecologist too. Formed in 1915, and they served at Gallipoli. One field ambulance is led today by their patron, Lieutenant Colonel Stu Jones, and their president, John Beaver.
There's Ray Hislop now, Colonel Ray Hislop, in front of the 5th Field Ambulance.
Yes, there he is. Current members have served in Bougainville, Solomon Islands, East Timor and Afghanistan. Here's some of your bands again, John.
Yes, and I can hear the strain of Dad's Army once again, but supported with that spectacular blue and white combination of the Castle Hill Marching Band, another band which is supported by a sub-branch of the RSL. And they look very spectacular there. Look at the crowds. Aren't they superb? Building up, we suggested they will build up as the day went on, and that certainly happened.
We see the various banners coming up now. The field ambulance, another 5th field, 8th field ambulance, served in Vietnam. at Vung Tau and Nui Dat. The Ordnance Corps, the motto to the warrior his arms. The Ordnance Corps is responsible for administrating and supplying all kinds of stores, equipment, weapons and ammunition to the troops, from local units to those who serve in operational overseas. Now we have the military police. My father was a member of this, of the Provos, they were called in the Second World War. Most popular arm of the Australian Army. Previously
but they've been around a long time, Bob.
Yes, they are celebrating 100 years of service, having been formed in 1916.
And there's the ladies of the Army Nursing Corps.
Led today by Major Eileen Henderson, President of New South Wales. The red jackets and grey trousers symbolise the traditional grey dresses and scarlet capes worn by the nurses up until the end of the Vietnam War.
Yes, in fact, they used to look quite distinguished in that traditional cherry and grey, and now they just look like any other member of the Army.
Here we have the Australian Army Psychology Corps. This was formed in 1952. It's there to provide mental health support for soldiers both domestically and on operation. Corps soldiers are deployed to Afghanistan, Iraq, East Timor and Solomon Islands. It also provides support to the wider community during tragedies such as bushfires and the Australian Port Arthur massacre.
They're a significant part of the soldiers and airmen coming home from the Middle East in doing the debriefing and follow-up support to them.
Yes, they've really taken over a very important role. We are John, the Women's Royal Australian Army Corps, led today by President Louise Green, with ASM Carol Marr.
And see Carolyn out there at the moment in front of the banner. She's always about at Army functions and very pushes for her old corps, the corps which no longer exists.
It was in 1985 it was disbanded and incorporated into the Australian Army as a whole.
Bob, we just did see a brief glimpse there of the Homebush Boys High School drum corps. Very small numbers on the parade. I remember past years they've been very well represented, but only a few there today.
We just had the Australian Peacekeepers and Peacemakers Association go by. And here we have the 2nd Division, led today by, it's Max Willis's, Brigadier Max Willis's name down here. I didn't see him come through.
No, I haven't seen the Honourable Max
yes.
at all, but...
Well, here comes the Lancers again, the 1st 15th Royal New South Wales Lancers, who were located at Lancer Barracks. They were formed in 1885 as a infantry unit and have 21 battle honours.
Frank Woodham's also the old 30th Battalion. The Scottish Regiment is supposed to be there, but it didn't immediately pick him up.
Yeah. 2nd 19th Battalion, which was the Bushman's Rifles at one stage, which were formed in all the country towns around New South Wales, and they just did one 4-week camp a year. Here's the association of the 4th Infantry Battalions. White over green again. The 4th Battalion was raised as part of the RAF during the First World War, and then the 2nd 4th in the Second World War, and has continued on into the Army Reserve units of the 4th Battalion of Royal New South Wales Regiment. Here we have the St George Regiment. This is where the old regiment, district regiments there. It was raised in the St George area of New South Wales, and it's led today by John Thomas, who's the association president. Again, it was part of the units that went to war in the First World War.
Now this is an interesting pipe and drum unit coming up. This is the Scots Old Boys. They're very well trained at school, and they formed about 5 or 6 years ago a Old Boys pipes and drums, and they've been regularly here, but I think they do recruit from outside. I noticed they were making some approaches to some of the young women at PLC a year or two apart, and that seemed to have been successful. It looked like a co-ed pipes and drums band.
The Association 17-inch battalions passed us too. Today it was led by Major Irving Warren, mainly from the north shores of Sydney 17th Battalion. Now we have the New South Wales Scottish Regiment, led today by Major Frank Woodham.
There he is. We spoke of him earlier, but there he is in front of the banner.
There he is, who spent 30 years in reserve.
left a little for camera, and we'll get Frank.
And obviously a policeman as well. He's an Australian police medal, is it?
There he is.
Yeah, Frank
That's Frank in the centre.
And he's killed.
Yes.
In fact, it came from the 30th Battalion were associated with them. It was my grandfather's battalion, formed in 1915.
Yeah, in fact, the 30th Battalion was the New South Wales Scottish Regiment.
In fact, when the 30th formed in 1915, a quarter of its first soldiers were Navy, who arrived in naval uniform.
They preferred
We converted
skirts.
them, did we? We converted them to the proper army.
250 and the 26 left at the end of the war.
Now, this looks to me like it could be the Australian Cadet Band Sydney. It's certainly, with their red puggaree on their slouch hats, I'd suspect that's who they are.
I bet you that drum major plays in the front row.
I would think so.
Might be unbalanced scrum, unfortunately.
You should see his twin brother.
The New South Wales National Servicemen's Association, led by Ron Brown, the state president. I'm just wondering if Fred Nile normally marches in this.
Well, Fred's certainly a strong supporter and previous national serviceman himself, and served in Sydney University Regiment.
This is known as the Nashos, and this contingent represents two periods of national service. The earlier period during the 1950s, and then, of course, the second period was 65 to 72.
But we often forget, Bob, that we had extensive national service in the National or Universal Training Scheme from, I think, 1911 to 1929, which had everyone from the age of 16 to 60. And, of course, we had compulsory training in World War II.
Australian Sports Medal on the chap just going past on the left. Issued in 2000 to prominent sports people.
We have the Officer Training Unit from Skyville, which was in an old abandoned... They set it up in an old abandoned camp up in Skyville years ago, and is led today by Major Dick Adams, and they produced officers for the Australian Army during the conscription years.
Dick Adams, of course, a former Deputy Commissioner of the New South Wales Police Force, and he's currently written a book about to be published on the history of the New South Wales Mounted Police Force.
Two of the graduates were the former Prime Minister Tim Fisher and also the former Premier of Victoria Jeff Kennett, both graduated as second lieutenants from Skyville.
And John, we can see on the screen the Corrective Services New South Wales band, splintered in blue.
Yeah, and Scott, this carries on the tradition we spoke about earlier, where all these utilities, and in fact all the big companies, all had their own band.
Directly behind them is the start of the post-war Royal Australian Air Force contingent, and you can see some of our guard dogs there from probably number 1 Security Force. The group's led by Group Captain Cameron Neal, Director General of Training Systems at Headquarters Air. Air Command at RAF Base Glenbrook. What well-behaved dogs.
John, is it normal that the headquarters at up on the hills would come down to the march?
No, this is their first presentation, first time in March. Now we have on screen the 22 City of Sydney Squadron, led today by Wing Commander Paul Radcliffe. And this is a mix of people, permanent and reserve, that provide combat support functions at RAF Base Regiment. And after spending a number of years in a purely reserve squadron, it's now a permanent Air Force unit. Now we have Headquarters Air Command, marching for the first time today from Glenbrook, located, it's led today by Commanding Officer Wing Commander Fleur James. Headquarters Air Command is responsible for managing the operational arm of the Royal Australian Air Force, all of its flying squadrons, ground-based combat support units, training elements, and the Air Warfare Centre.
I often look with desired eyes upon their premises up on the hill overlooking the Nepean River there, John.
It's probably worth a fortune, John.
Yeah, I would think so, without any doubt. And here we have a special band. This is St Patrick's College from Strathfield. First time ever in the march. And I can say Bob beside me, Bob Wall, Major Bob Wall, proud as punch. It's his old school.
Yes, I must admit we didn't have a band when I was there. I understand they've just come back from Launceston, where they were in the band competition now, and they won their won their group.
Directly behind them, John, we have the Australian Flying Corps banner, and there's Ron Glue, the president, state president from Association. He flew transport flight in Vietnam as an assistant loadmaster. Directly behind him there, the RAF Association State Executive. I can see there Phil Speed, the treasurer. I just can't see who else is there at the moment, but Association is the peak body that represents past and present members of the RAF. That's Phil Speed right there now.
Oh, beautiful.
And next to him is Ian Wood, used to fly Caribous as well.
Of course, John,
and on the right there is Jeff Usher.
the Flying Corps had its origins in World War I, and it was filled with all the historic aviation names that we know right through our history.
That's true. And here we see a banner that you don't normally get to see these days, the RAF Association, Women's Royal Australian Air Force, and it's led today by Mrs. Shirley McLaren, right there in the front, patron of the association, who was in the first intake in 1951. The service was formed at the outbreak of the Korean War to free up men in the RAF for active service. And in 1977 it was disbanded and joined the Royal Australian Air Force. There's a contingent of serving female members marching with this group of women today.
So the RAF were the first of the services to integrate the women, John?
Yes. And here we have a bomber squadron banner. It's including personnel that served from post-war with squadrons numbers 1 and 2. Number 1 squadron was F-111s, number 2 squadron Canberra Bombers. The first of the Air Force squadrons to be formed in January 16 was 1 squadron, and that later became our F-111 squadron. So now we've got the transport squadrons, followed by RAF Vietnam there. It's led today by Squadron Leader Graham Christian, Transport Flight Vietnam 35 Squadron. Was the second ADF unit allocated to Vietnam in 1964 after the Army training team, and flying unarmed Caribous, often at treetop level. They were the target of hostile ground fire. It's also accompanied by 9 Squadron Iroquois.
And these are the pipes and drums, second time around Knox Grammar School Pipe Band. Commented earlier, a big band, not as big as that on parade for the Scots College from Bellevue Hill, but certainly very presentable and big numbers on parade this morning.
Looks like you can see the banner there behind of 36 Squadron, led today by Mr. Bob Nicholson. This is one of my old squadrons, formed in 1942. They flew an assortment of ex-airliners across Australia and New Guinea and were equipped with a C-47 Dakota. They served as the biscuit bomber in the New Guinea campaign, supplying supplies by parachute. Squadron flew missions in Japan, Korea and Malaysia post-war before equipping with the first C-130s, Hercules transport. And it's flown those since until re-equipping with the C-17 Globemaster in 2006. Now we have 37 Squadron Association, led by Mr. Cole Coyne, President of the Association today. Originally formed in 1943, it supported the Commonwealth Occupational Force in Japan before being disbanded. It's based at Richmond today, operating the C-130J. And these are the members of the association. Now this is the first time 38 Squadron has marched today, and it's marching with its new colours from the Republic of Vietnam, the Cross of Gallantry. It's led by Air Vice Marshal Brian Plenty. Now we've got 35 Squadron. This is the current 35 Squadron, RAF-based Richmond, flying the new C-27J Spartan aircraft. What a fine turnout.
They're
It's led today by Wing Commander Jared Pendlebury. It was reformed in January 2013, and I was out at Richmond for that reformation. It's also fought in Vietnam, known as Wallaby Airlines, and it's now equipped with 5 Spartans and 4 more to come at the end of the year. Now we have Skippy Squadron. These are the airline people that used to fly support missions to and from outside the battle zones.
Now the second time around, this is the Australian Air League squadron at Riverwood. As I mentioned previously, the biggest Air League squadron, not only in the state, but I'm sure in the country. And it's expanding. In fact, it's said to be the youth group with the largest established, or the greatest established expansion rate in Sydney.
Can't quite see the banner yet, John, but I think it's 37 Squadron. It's serving members that are following straight behind this, led today by Wing Commander Matthew Cooper. There's
Yes,
the banner.
37 it is.
And there's their battle honours. And it's part of the Air Mobility Group. The squadron operates 12 C-130Js from its base at Richmond. It's heavily involved in rapid operations and also has a detachment in the Middle East. It has a unique record of supporting humanitarian assistance both in Australia and the wider region, including Vanuatu and Fiji this year of the devastating cyclones. And since 1958, the Hercules from 36 and 37 Squadron have accumulated 820,000 hours, all accident-free, and it's a remarkable achievement. When you look at those people marching there, though, their discipline is so great, and they look so good. It's you've got to be proud of it.
I think we've commented previously, John, it's great to see the Navy and the Air Force with such large numbers of uniforms in their various contingents.
Yeah. Now we have the Air Mobility Training and Development, used to be called Umpty-Doo, and that's based at Richmond. We're serving members, led today by the commanding officer, Matt Hetherington. This unit prepares airdrop material so that we can drop to troops from C-130 and C-17 transport aircraft. Also, we do some airdrop from helicopters. And 285 Squadron is there marching today. That's another unit from Richmond, led by Wing Commander Jason Baldock. It was formed in 1999 and located at Richmond, and the squadron provides training for all the operations out of there. Now we have the fighter squadrons coming up, number 3 Squadron Association. We have 3 Squadron there, which is this is one of Australia's most distinguished squadrons, having been formed 100 years ago in Point Cook in 1916 and serving on the Western Front during World War I. We've got some wheelchair veterans there.
And they're World War II veterans too, John.
Yes. Post-Second World War, the squadron was the first to operate the Sabre jet fighter, and also was based at Butterworth in Malaysia for 26 years. It's now based at Williamtown, north of Newcastle, and operates F-18 Hornet jet fighters. Later in the decade, it'll become the first Australian squadron to operate the advanced 35A Lightning Joint Striker. Now we have 75 Squadron Association. Now 75 Squadron and 76, which we hope will be following straight after that, were both distinguished in the Battle of Mill Bay, and this is the 75th anniversary for these squadrons for their service there.
And the uniform, I remember seeing my father in one of those, John.
I've still got one in the wardrobe.
Yeah.
He'll be wearing it next year when he marches.
Oh, you never know. Anyway, here we go. 75 Squadron of Distinguished Service in the Second World War, based in Moulder, stationed in Butterworth, and now we're on to 76 Squadron. These are current serving members, led by Wing Commander Neville O'Donnell.
Now the band just to the front of the RAF group there, one we see every year here. They've changed their uniform. Don't Pittwater House School Cadet band from the Northern Beaches area.
76 Squadron was formed in 1942 and flying Kitterhawks, and did a marvellous job at Mill Bay. And Bluey Truscott was also a member of the squadron, the famous Spitfire pilot, Australian Spitfire pilot from the European battles. And now we have, can't quite see, looks like 77 Squadron. This is also one of the most illustrious units in the Air Force. It was formed in 1942. The contingent today consists of veterans from the Korean War, the Malaysian emergency, Indonesian confrontation, and recent deployments to the Middle East. They're joined by the current serving personnel from Williamtown, and 77 Squadron is best remembered as the first British Commonwealth military unit to see action in the Korean War, and the first RAF unit to fly jet aircraft in combat. Now we've moved on to 79 Squadron, RAF U-bomb. This was also formed in 1943, initially equipped with Spitfires. And Post-war, it provided air defence for the Ubin base in Thailand from 1962 to the early years of the Vietnam conflict. Now we moved on to the maritime squadrons. Maritime squadrons don't seem to be heavily represented there, but 10 Squadron and 11 Squadron are the current two maritime squadrons based at Edinburgh.
But it is the second time round for the Air League's Mount Pritchard Squadron, their drum corps. We should say drum corps supplemented by one trumpet.
So it's like an airfield construction squadron. It looks like banner only, and following that is the supporting squadrons. Now, support squadrons were, in these days, in the late post-Second World War, were number 5 airfield construction squadrons, mainly built their job was mainly to build and maintain airfields so that they could be utilised properly by the various aircraft types entering service. Now we have 65 Squadron. Don't recognise the air-based recovery.
John, just to question, the airfield construction squadron's no longer with us. Who builds the airfields these days?
Well, it's obviously a contracted out task,
Yes.
John. Yes, we don't have that skill anymore. And this is the RAF's National Serviceman, led today by Mr. Brian Manelli. You can see him there with the greying hair. He's probably torn a bit out after his service. This is known as the Rare Breed. The first national service scheme was introduced in 1951 to increase the number of men available to the RAF. And during the Korean War and the Malaysian emergency, the threat of the possible World War was very real, and members were only accepted if they volunteered for overseas service. 20,000 served over a 6-year period. Some worked on aircraft involved in atomic blasts at Montebello Islands off Western Australia and at Maralinga. Now we have the Royal Air Force contingent, the association of the Sydney branch led by Flying Officer Val Doherty. The Royal Air Force Association Sydney branch represents all airmen and women who served in the Royal Air Force in the UK and all around the globe. And the members include many ex-Second World War airmen and all ranks from Air Marshal to Air Craftsman. And this now we have is the number 3 Aeromedical Evacuation Squadron, serving members from RAF Base Regiment, led today by Wing Commander Andrew Ormsby.
Well, I'm going to be shocked, John, if I don't mention this, my old school, Newington College Cadet Corps Band.
Those medical evacuation people have done marvellous work over the last few years, John. With,
Well, they have. And
repatriating people and after disasters and bombings. And
and they fly in all 3 transport aircraft too, John.
Only small on the ground, but an interesting group, war correspondents, led today by one of my old colleagues, David Telfer, ex-cameraman with the ABC. But with war correspondents, we think of big names, the late Neil Davis, for example. We think of Banjo Patterson of the Boer War. We think of Chester Wilmot, both the ABC and BBC in World War II.
And Damien Pero, of course.
Yes, indeed.
And then we have the Forces Entertainment Association, led by there's Little Patty, Sylvia Ray. This association represents all those who entertained Australian troops in the post-war period, from the Vietnam War, Iraq, Afghanistan, East Timor and the Solomon Islands. They are very proud of their contribution to the morale of the troops.
And it goes on, Bob. Entertainers, performers, comedians still head overseas to entertain the troops.
It's a wonderful thing to see it still happening.
So you offer your guitar soon, Scott?
Well, always available, Tony.
And directly behind them is the civilian medical and surgical teams, Vietnam, led by Miss Jan Bell, who worked as a nurse in Vung Tau Hospital for 12 months. The Australian government recruited doctors and nurses to work in South Vietnamese hospitals as part of the CEDAW agreement.
Brief, the South Pacific Concert Band, first time around today, one of our regular bands here, ex-Army in its origins, but now a civilian band.
Oh, the legacy is we weren't expecting, but what a fantastic organisation, right back to General Savage and his contemporaries after the First World War, looking after and carrying on the tradition, carrying the torch, as they say. Stan Savage. many a serviceman's children and wives have been helped.
Now we have the descendants of the Boer War. Today has been led by Lieutenant Colonel David Deasy. This is a new group recently set up by descendants to commemorate the 16,000 Australians who served in the Boer War. A national memorial to these troops is currently being planned and we've built along Anzac Parade in Canberra. In fact, there's supposed to be end of May, there will be a dedication.
And now we have the banner of the Australian World War I descendants, and this is a joy to see these people remembering those that served them. This group is direct descendants of those who served in the Australian forces from 1914 to 18, and the centenary marks years of Anzac are very significant to these people. First formed in 2000 with only 9 members, the association now has a growing membership of over 200, from sons and daughters, nieces and nephews, to great-great-great-grandchildren. They are marching to honour relatives long past.
And in the midst of that very, very big turnout, which is great to see, again for the second time, I think it's the... I thought it was Sydney Boys High School, but no, it's the wrong colours. It's blue and gold. So I'll try and pick up their name a little later on.
And following them are the descendants of World War II, Army, Navy, Air Force and Merchant Navy. And some of the banners that have been retired from units where there's no longer left for anyone to march in front of parade will be carried within this group. And as with the First World War veterans, they're men and women who are carrying the medals of their fathers, grandfathers, uncles, cousins, some who died, some who returned, and honouring their service going forward. There's some veterans marching in this group where they've no longer an association veteran. They've elected to march with their family back with the main group. I can see one banner slightly coming into view behind them. And there we go, it's a General Hospital banner. So these are banners which have been retired. They're no longer being carried by veterans, but they're being carried in honour of those veterans as part of the descendants of World War II. Australian General Hospital, Darwin, Eritrea, Palestine, New Guinea, Maritime, and looking after the POWs coming home from Europe. Behind them is the 2nd AIF banner. Headquarter Australian Corps Foundation. 2nd 17th Battalion, a famous battalion, fought in the Middle East and then came home to fight for the defence of Australia. Yellow Mane, Scarlet Boots, Finchhaven. And John's favourite band coming up behind them.
Incidentally, Tony, we've managed to identify the band that went past a few moments ago. First time in the march, so didn't recognise them. It's Marist College from North Shore Marching Band.
My brother's old school, Marist Brothers, North Sydney.
Yes.
Whoops. His teacher was John Gray, the rugby league player.
There is no doubt. This always appeals to me, the Millennium Marching Band, the colours, the new hats, as Bob Moore pointed out. But we notice when we get to the banner bearers waving their banners, they don't wear the new hat. They're wearing berets. I think their hats would have been a bit dangerous, the way that they twirl those banners about.
This is a very large band.
Yes.
Do you know where they're from, John? The Millennium Marching Band, who we're watching currently?
I have an idea. They come from Newcastle.
One of them came from, I think he realised that he just
No,
wanted
no.
he wanted to get a plug-in for Newcastle.
No. Purely coincidental.
Yeah. But we see there, berets, a wise choice,
Yes.
given the way those banners are thrown about. And walking round 2 or 3 times, throwing those flags round your head would not be easy.
No, it requires a lot of stamina, and also huge kudos to the crowds here. They've been here now for more than 3 hours, cheering and applauding those passing by. Thousands participating, thousands flanking the route along Elizabeth Street to say well done and thank you.
And we see some of the other banners no longer applicable. There are no members of the original unit left. Descendants have them, and they're marching here today. 8th Division Service Corps, 2nd 18th Battalion.
And there's one veteran actually with the cane there, John.
Yes, there is
obviously
indeed.
Still marching.
Yes.
Preferring to march with his family than by himself.
Yeah, someone said a friend of Smokey Dawson's, perhaps. We miss Smokey. He was a regular marcher on this day, used to wave to the crowd. The crowd recognised him. It was a great feeling as he went past.
And one of the battalions from the 8th Division.
Some interesting battle honours there. Endu, Malaya, Mersing, Singapore.
There's still quite a few veterans in amongst these groups, John. It's amazing that there's
It's
marching.
surprising how some of the associations are now down to 1 or 2 people, and that's about all. And because of that, we've lost a lot of the traditional banners. As the associations have passed on, the members, the banners have been disposed of by all sorts of ways. It's a pity, but just a fact of life. But the banners still come, all supported by their descendants.
Well, it's part of the tradition, isn't it?
The
Part
last,
of the story.
the last member of the Ratzer Tobruk Association, which closed a few years ago on the mid-north coast, passed away last year.
There's 450 Squadron RAAF, the Desert Harassers. We haven't seen them for ages.
You have an anti-tank and an anti-aircraft. That's being fairly flexible there. If you can't get the tank, you get the plane. A tank regiment.
Just a pause in the march program at the moment, but we can take a look at the spectators. We suggested earlier they would increase the numbers, and they certainly have, and they're just as enthusiastic. But we look now, second time they've come round today. This is the Clan MacLeod pipe band, number 21 on the march order.
And here we have the Airborne and Special Forces, led today by Mr. Eddie Cudd. These are veterans from the British paratroop regiments known as the Red Devils, because of their distinctive maroon berets. There's Mr. Eddie Cudd there now. There are a number of World War II veterans here today who participated in the Normandy landings, the Battle of Arnhem, and the Rhine crossing, which was the biggest airborne operation of the war. Association was formed by ex-British paras living in Australia and was extended to include veterans from all special forces.
We're obviously now moving into those units which were Allied units, not part of the Australian Defence Force, but certainly Allies in past, and the Australians have usually and often formed side by side with them.
And we just should mention the group that just went past was a Combined British Forces Association, which is a relatively new association formed by ex-servicemen of the British Forces with the green banner. And here, oh, here they are now. Sorry, my apologies. And so they are a new association, all 10-pound poms probably, and they're later. All have come out and made Australia their home, and they're marching in remembrance of their comrades.
Yes, I think the group before was the association from the Airborne and Special Forces there, Tony, so we better give them some credit.
And moving on, is it the Gurkhas?
No, it looks like Fiji.
Looks like Fiji to me.
Yeah, that's
Yes. We've got a few units coming out of order at the moment.
Fiji is one of the countries that's had the most contribution to UN forces after Canada around the world. They always have a half battalion in the Golden Heights, from memory.
I think they have more Fijian soldiers overseas than they have in Fiji.
And now we pick up, I think for the third time round, the girls from Burwood Girls High School. About the third, perhaps fourth time they've marched, and their numbers seem to be expanded every time. Third time I've been told. Thank you very much for the information. No doubt about it. Get something wrong and they let you know very quickly.
Here are the Gurkhas now. Of course, they come from that small but beautiful country of Nepal. And they've served with the British Army for more than 200 years. Now, they are noted for their bravery and strength. They are fine warriors. There were 4 Gurkha battalions serving in Gallipoli. Gurkha Bluff, captured rather early in that campaign, was named in their honour. Now, during the August offensive, the 6th Gurkhas were among the only troops to reach the heights of Sari Bair, and they were able to look down upon the Dardanelles Straits before they were pushed back. in a counter-offensive there in the Gallipoli campaign. 10 Gurkha regiments operated during World War II, serving in Syria, North Africa, Italy, Burma, India, as well as in Singapore. Now, in May 2009, the British government announced that all Gurkha veterans who had retired before 97 with at least 4 years service would be allowed to settle in the UK.
They have the most amazing museum at Pokhara in Nepal. I highly recommend it to anyone who visits Nepal.
Now from Hong Kong.
The Hong Kong Regiment, the Volunteers, led by Patrick Chung, Warrant Officer Class 1. I think he's led it for many years, John. The Volunteers were formed in 1854 due to the defenceless state of the colony at the time. They saw active service during the defence of Hong Kong during World War II and was awarded the Battle Honours of Hong Kong. The Volunteers were renamed after the war and were later honoured with the title of Royal. The regiment was disbanded in September 1995 after 141 years of service. I think that's when Hong Kong reverted back to Chinese control.
In fact, many of our colleagues serving in the reserve when posted their business continued service in the Hong Kong Regiment.
Directly behind them, John, we have the Indian Defence Forces, led today by Colonel Joseph Matthews, a former infantry battalion commander. Around 15,000 Indian troops and non-combatants served at Gallipoli, fighting alongside our Anzacs. 2 mountain artillery batteries landed at Anzac Cove on the 25th of April and stayed until the final evacuation. The 29th Infantry Brigade played a crucial role during the August offensive.
Just trying to pick up the band that's come immediately. Now picture they're immediately ahead of the Polish ex-service contingent, and the colours echo the same theme. There must be an association. We'll try and there's
the Maltese band of New South Wales.
There we are, the Maltese band.
And quite fitting, they're probably leading the Maltese sub-branch of the RSL, formed over 50 years ago, and have been marching on Anzac Day for 42 years now. And as we know, Malta was awarded the George Cross for their collective heroism as a nation, or as a colony in those days, on the siege of Malta. And many Maltese people immigrated to Australia post-war and form an integral part in Australian society.
Yeah, there we are, our Peace, Lady of Peace band, it is, from Malta.
And here are the sub-branch themselves. Appears most of them are wearing medals honouring their forebearers' service, although there are 1 or 2 coming through that have got medal ribbons on or of their own. Little known fact that when HMAS Sydney was sunk, 4 of the casualties were Maltese canteen assistants, civilians serving on board HMAS Sydney. It annoys me when journalists refer to them all as sailors or Air Force personnel on Sydney, as well as Maltese canteen assistants. We had canteen assistants on all the cruisers, and they were mainly Maltese.
Just in front of the Rhodesian veterans there, Tony will make mention of the Newfoundland contingent. Now, this is the first time that Newfoundland has marched in Anzac Day ceremonies, and the Newfoundland Regiment was the only unit from North America to serve at Gallipoli in 1915, and it's the only place in North America where Anzac Day is commemorated. It was a British dominion until 1949. Thereafter it became a Canadian province.
There's their banner.
There they are.
And
Newfies, lovely people.
Is that what they call themselves?
Newfies.
Newfies.
Yep.
There
The
you go.
Newfies.
And Canadians tell Newfie jokes like we tell Tasmanian jokes. We won't go there.
And second time around now in their blue there. That is from the Hawkesbury District, the Hawkesbury District Concert Band.
And the Rhodesian Regiment has just passed was formed in 1898 and served alongside Australian troops in World War II. During the Second World War, the Rhodesian Armed Forces served in many British units and supplied 3 squadrons to the RAF.
Directly behind the band is the Sikh Regiment, led by, I might get this wrong, Colonel Charanjit Singh Chima. During the First World War, Sikh regiments served at the Western Front, Gallipoli, the Middle East and Mesopotamia. During the Third Battle of Karitha at Gallipoli, the 14th Sikh Battalion lost more than half its members killed or wounded in a matter of hours.
I see Warrant Officer Singh Sidhu, who I work with, marching with them there, John.
Yeah.
With Captain Sir Ginger Sindhu as well. So they've been here every year and well represented.
Yeah, during World War II, the Sikhs fought in the North African campaign in Italy, as well as in many areas across the Asian continent.
And we do recall we did have the Sikh band here
That's
on
right.
1 May. They were very spectacular.
I understand they could be back next year.
South Africans.
South Africa. Now, the South Africans have fought alongside Australians in 4 major conflicts over the years, both World Wars and Korean. And the veterans marching today represent all 4 arms of the Defence Force, the Army, Navy, Air Force, and their medical services. The current South African Defence Force is actively involved in peacekeeping and anti-piracy efforts in Central Africa.
Marching koalas are there for you, John.
They are in that spectacular, vivid uniform. And again, they got waving flags. I make the comment, I would like to walk 2-3 times round the march route waving those banners. But their pace just a little steadying, a little slower than their other times round.
After 3.5 hours, who would blame them?
I wonder if those kids have got bottles of water in their hip pockets, because I think they'd need them.
Particularly carting those tubers round.
It's certainly a large band, and it has been going for more than 2 decades now in the Newcastle and Hunter region. Has represented the Hunter in festivals, not only around Australia, but overseas as well.
Is there any rumour, Scott, that you're getting the march moved to Newcastle next year?
We would put on a good show, Tony, just as Sydney does.
They're the United States.
There you, our American cousins. They've served with Australia since 1917. A lot of people don't know that when the Americans first arrived in the Western Front, a lot of them were embedded in Australian units and went into action with Australian units. And some Australian officers were seconded to the Americans to assist them. Legion Post, number 1, established in Sydney in 1945. A lot of Americans made Australia home after meeting and marrying Australian women or just liking the country. Some stayed legally, some probably stayed illegally. The alliance with America has been strong and sound for the last 60 years.
And just behind the Americans, the Chinese, led by Colonel Victor Tsang from the Army Reserve, and the Chinese Defence Force fought the Japanese for 9 years, from 1937 to 45, and effectively held more than 1 million Japanese troops in China who otherwise could well have been involved in the war in the Pacific. And some Australians did fight alongside the Chinese on the island of Hainan after they had escaped from a POW camp.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we now have to leave this telecast of the Anzac Day March in Sydney to cross to Gallipoli for a live broadcast of the dawn service. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all my fellow commentators. We look forward to your company next year.